get shit done. It's by far the greatest podcast known to man and kicks the most ass.
Hey now, it's Promoter 101, episode 61. I'm your shaman, Dan Steinberg. Climbing the mountain with us today is our very zen Luke Pierce.
There's got to be a Sherpa joke to be made in there somewhere, Dan. Let's talk about what we have in store for the show today. We're going to be joined later by CAA Nashville's John Huie, manager David Geller, and another war story from CID Entertainment's Dan Berkowitz.
Berkowitz was so good 2 weeks ago for the war story, we had to bring him back and get another one. The guy can just tell stories.
We got a special guest this week for the news, Dan.
Dave Brooks is back with us. How exciting is that, Luke?
Of course, Dan. We're excited to have our buddy Dave Brooks back on the podcast from Billboard Touring, here to talk about the news of the week.
Hey, this is Rob Zaffarelli.
Patty Ann Tarleton.
Paul Lohr. Phil Rodriguez.
Rick Greenstein.
Donatas Nachayos.
Rob Pellet. Rich Mills. Sasha Bombaji.
Seth Hurwitz. Steve Martin.
Whitney Bond.
This is Trip Brown.
Wayne Forte.
Steve Zapp.
Trevor Solomon.
Live on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
If you've missed any of the past podcasts, you can always catch up at Promoter101.net. This week, we feature a special reissue of episode 18. Partner and agent at William Morris Endeavor, Mark Geiger. Representing the Pixies, Neil Diamond, Nine Inch Nails. I mean, it goes on for days on who else he has. Also, second interview with Justin Bieber's tour manager, David Klein, and the Black Keys Major Lazer, Emperor's Sons, Imagine Dragons guy, Jim Runge, both hanging out together. Really great session. And if you haven't heard it, it's new to you.
Hey, it's Pete Shapiro from Brooklyn Bowl and a bunch of other stuff, and I'm going to be down at FlyCon on Promoter 101. Shit.
We continue our world tour. Catch up with us as we come to a town near you.
Next week, Aspen Live. We're just 1 week away. Dan's going to be sitting down at Aspen Live on December 8th, 5:30 p.m. for a one-on-one interview with the president of Ticketmaster North America, Mr. Jared Smith. Dan, very excited about that. It's going to be a great interview in that room. And if you're not attending Aspen Live, we encourage you to check it out. Jim Louie runs an amazing conference, and we're both very excited to return. If you have a question that you'd like us to ask Jared Smith, email Dan at steiny@promoter101.net or tweet it at us at promoters101. That's plural.
Programming note for next week, because we're recording the program at 5:30 next week and we're going to give it to you that same day on the podcast, we may be a little late getting it up next Friday, but it will be up next Friday night, so it'll almost be in real time. Look out for that. We're coming to FlyCon. It's heating up in the Big Easy on January 16th at 2 p.m. Promoter 101 has a very special guest from Locken and the Brooklyn Bowls, Mr. Peter Shapiro.
Shappy. Can't wait for that one, Dan.
Looking forward to it. That guy can hold court. He's like the mayor of all things cool.
In the meantime, keep up with us on Twitter. Dan is at The Jew. The show is at Promoters. That's Promoters plural 101. And I'm at W. Luke Pierce.
And for our friends in the past that have listened to the podcast, they know the W stands for William.
Yes, that is a pretty well-known fact at this point, despite my objections about being called it.
Shout out to both Mother and Father Pierce for naming you William instead of Luke. Hey, we want to hear from you. Luke and I are always talking, and I guess it kind of does have to be that way because it's a fucking podcast. But we want your ideas, your thoughts, your feedbacks. We really don't want your criticism, so keep that shit to yourself. But email us your ideas to steiny@promoter101.net. If you want to come on the show, or if you want to be on 3 questions, or if you have an idea for a guest, hit us up. We'll respond to you somewhat timely fashion, I guess.
Dan, speaking of past podcasts, of the 60 past podcasts and well over 100 interviews now, what are your top 5 favorite?
That's a hard question. It's like asking which one of my children are my favorite. Geiger's got to be up there. BOC was amazing. Jay Marciano was great. I personally got a kick out of hanging out with Jim Glancy for that interview. And I think Meglin is possibly the best storyteller we've ever had on the show. What are yours?
I got to say that we share a few similar ones. One of my top has to be Brian O'Connell. Just an incredible interview, an incredible experience, getting to pick that guy's brain. Geiger's definitely got to be up there. For me, a very recent interview in the past 10 podcasts, your interview with Louis Messina. I think that was an incredible interview that everybody needs to go back and revisit. And then to, hear from guys like Tom Windish and Jay Williams too. I mean, some really, really great interviews.
Guys like Shep and Tom Ross. It's hard to just name 10. There's so many.
Tom Ross, interview number 1. That's a fantastic interview that everybody should go back and listen to. Just some serious, amazing storytelling and some applicable lessons from his time in building an incredible agency. There's so many great stories, so many great lessons that can be pulled from those interviews.
I got to say that I thought Druskin dropped some amazing stats when he was on, and David Marcus blew me away.
And if you haven't, you should seriously go back and check it. There are 60 episodes of Promoter 101 up. This is episode number 61. There are many fantastic interviews we've been able to offer up in the past. If you want to hear from anyone else or have an interview to suggest, send us a note at steiny@promoter101.net. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Promoter 101 wherever you podcast. And please help us spread the word about this podcast. Tell a friend or two. If you got a second, drop us a review on iTunes. It seriously helps our ratings.
This is John Schultz. Tom Windish.
Charlie from Crescent Ballroom.
Craig Newman.
Dave Brooks.
Dave Chumley here. Dave Ratner.
John Holiday.
Ted Becknell.
LX.
Umong Shaw.
Elliot Lefko.
Gerald B. Henley.
Harlan Fry here.
Jack Ross.
Jason Miller.
Jeffrey Fox. Joe Escalante.
Blair LeBlanc. Martin Atkins.
Neil Dixon. Nick Farkas.
Paula Palazzo.
And I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101!
Before we move on, I want to take a moment to recommend a movie that everyone in the industry should see. Who the fuck is Arthur Fogel? It can be rented at Amazon currently. We've posted a link on all of our social media. It is a great story about possibly the best promoter in the world. It's time for the news of the week, and we're joined by Dave Brooks. How you doing, Dave?
I am great. Great to be here as always, Steiny.
What's going on in the world? Catch us up.
I think the big item everyone's talking about right now is this Live Nation bid to buy SMG. Of course, SMG is the venue management giant based in Philly. They've got US Bank Stadium, Soldier Field, Superdome, the BOK Center. I mean, they've got arenas, stadiums, convention centers.
They're not the only bid, and it's definitely not going to them, right? Like, it's still a jump ball as far as the world is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. We don't really know how many people have made an offer on the company or where Live Nation's kind of bid stands against everybody else. And yeah, we see there's definitely some synergies, obviously, between Live Nation and SMG. I mean, you basically would have kind of a vertical merger, right? Live Nation on the content side, SMG on the facility side.
Same thing like Ticketmaster Live Nation a couple years ago. They feed together very well.
Exactly. And that deal required a Department of Justice approval. We're still in the consent decree period for the Department of Justice. Almost surely this SMG Live Nation deal would also require a sign-off from the DOJ. If I was Live Nation and I was looking at this deal, I'd be pretty nervous about the potential for congressional hearings, lawmaker scrutiny, because you start having a couple of hearings on the purchase of SMG, and you're just inviting all of their opponents, all of their competitors to go ahead back to Capitol Hill, bring up issues about Live Nation that could really go anywhere. Intense scrutiny of this deal could kind of open Pandora's box and just be a headache in general.
I think Live Nation handles themselves in a very public market friendly kind of way, very Wall Street. They're not afraid of those things. They take those challenges and they step up to them.
We'll see what happens with this bid. According to Sports Business Journal's Don Murray, the bid's closed on Tuesday. So we should have a pretty good idea soon if Live Nation is the new owner of SMG.
What else is going on in the news, Dave?
Something we've been watching over at Google, the search engine giant is finally cracking down on deceptive ticket resale sites. The LukeBryantTickets.coms, the Superdome Super Bowl Tickets.com. Basically, you have these secondary brokers creating deceptive URLs and confusing the consumer to think that these pop-up sites are the official ticketing marketplace of various events, whether they're actually ticketed by Ticketmaster, Ticketfly, Access, whatever. People have been calling on Google to do this for a while. They're finally stepping up. They're going to basically require resellers to certify their sites before they can use the AdWords platform, to game the SEO. And there's rules in place about disclosing at the top that there are secondary sites, not using deceptive language. I think it's a good move to kind of clean up this part of the industry that consumers hate.
Well, it seems like a really good Big Brother corporate thing that they're doing at this point. And whether it took them a long time to get there or not, I think the world welcomes this to the game, especially the industry part of the world. Protecting the fans is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Big Brother, right? These guys say, don't be evil. I think what happened, honestly, was they were cranking in some serious dough from these broker ads, but the closer they got with Access and Ticketmaster, and the more money they started making through the primary, not to mention feeling those are more legitimate companies with access to talent, I think Google had to survey the landscape and saying, well, is it worth like the money we're making off of these scalpers to, not only anger the industry, but fans? So I'm sure it was a calculation and not an early Christmas present for ticket buyers.
Dave, speaking of big corporate companies, we've seen Amazon change their whole footing on the ticketing platform for North America. What's going on with this?
Amazon, since the beginning of the year, has been trying to get into ticketing. We've been reporting it at Amplify and at Billboard. They've had a lot of success in Europe. There's more of an open distribution allocation model where anybody can sell tickets once they're given an allocation by the promoter. As you know, US is different. It's an exclusivity model. Ticketmaster has the exclusives sell tickets to their venues. So Amazon is hoping to expand into the U.S. and create, ticket offers for their prime customers, right? In order for them to enter the U.S. the way they wanted to, they had to cut a deal with Ticketmaster. They worked on it for a year, and Ticketmaster basically said, thanks, but no thanks. We don't need you guys to help us sell Beyonce and Guns N' Roses tickets. I think that was kind of the crux of what it came down to.
Let's talk about Brian Penix has left NS2 for Vector. What's going on there?
Yeah, very excited for Brian. He's been doing management for a while, right? He had Tommy Emmanuel and some other acts, and he decided to focus full-time on management. He signed his first new client for Vector, Amanda Shires, who's, of course, Jason Isbell's wife and is an incredible vocalist and violinist, and he's going to make it work. He's going to do the manager gig. I spoke to him about it, and he seemed extremely happy to make the plunge, so good for him.
Brian has been an amazingly outgoing personality that everyone seems to like, and Andy McKee seems to be happening. Amanda Shires is having a moment. He is clearly one of those guys that really knows how to dig deep and make something happen. Clearly, Ken Levitan saw talent with him, and that's good things. And I think this is going to open up really good doors for artists like Tommy Emmanuel that are already doing amazing numbers across the country.
Yeah, Brian's been with him for so long, Tommy Emmanuel, and he gets it. And they're working on this duets album, and I've seen a few of the duets already, and they're really good. I think he's gonna really excel and enjoy himself.
What else is out there, my friend?
I got one more for you. The Parish in Austin, Texas, on historic 6th Street, is being sold on eBay. Starting bid $1.
Is there a reserve?
There is a reserve. So I spoke to ATX Brands CEO Doug Goller, who owns the Parish. And yes, there is a reserve, of course, which he won't disclose. Once you get past the reserve, whatever that is, basically you're buying a 22-year lease for the Parish. It's like a 5,300 square foot venue, has 2 bars, all kinds of shows coming through Austin. Super competitive market, but it's definitely one of those venues that if you go to South by or other Austin stuff, you find yourself in a lot. This is the second venue that he sold on eBay, and the third overall. Earlier this year, he sold the Scoot In to C3 Presents. So ATX is basically getting out of the music business. They're kind of focusing on their food and beverage business. We'll see how this sale goes.
Is there a buy it now bar?
Good question. I don't know. I'll have to check.
Dave Brooks, it is always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I want to congratulate you on the conference you just pulled off in LA. I got to say, I'm a fan of it being in New York, but you guys did a much better conference this year than it was in LA by far last year. And I really enjoyed the experience all the way around.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot to me. I'm glad you had a good time, and I hear you on New York. Let me tell you, I'm working on it.
Awesome. Promoter 101 with the great Dave Brooks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steiny. I always love being on the show, and you're just doing a phenomenal job.
Why, thank you, Dave.
No problem.
Lucy Lawler-Freese, Rival Entertainment and the Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm on Promoter 101.
And finally, I want to take a moment to shine a spotlight on the godfather of online ticketing, Andrew Druskin. He's so smart, he's been able to sell his company not once, but twice in the same field. Plus a great guy all the way around, making him this week's Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Congrats goes out to you, Andrew. Well deserved.
Hi, this is Heath Miller.
Becca Leifer.
Ed Mike Cohn.
Derek
Eric Dimmenstein,
Jason Kupperman,
Jason Miller,
John Schur,
Marcia Vlasic,
Mike Fruitman, Ricardo Bacco,
Peter Schwartz,
Nick Storch.
I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
I'm on Promoter 101.
In the feature interview this week, we're joined by CAA Nashville's big dog, Mr. John Huie. He's here to give us an up-close glimpse at his career path through gospel ministry up through running the office of one of the largest agencies in the world. Mr. John Huie, welcome to Promoter 101.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the history because it's amazing. You and your brother are both in the business. Did you guys both get into it at the same time?
God, no. I actually got him into it. He was a senior at Davidson College, and I actually helped him get on the concert committee, and I ran a college department for the Paragon Agency in Macon, Georgia in 1978.
Alex Hodges Land.
Alex Hodges Land. He was my first boss. Gave me my first job, and I gave him all the credit for it. And Buck Williams was actually the agent I dealt with at Paragon who made my introduction to Alex. So we're full circle.
That is some rock and roll history right there.
There's some history, yeah. And then Ian Copeland and I left in 79 to move to New York to start FBI, Frontier Booking International.
Some of the people that had gone through that company were amazing. And Lisa Miller and Brett Smith. It just goes on for days. Mitch Oakman, like the history of that company is insane.
It was a lot of fun.
Different change of pace, certainly from Macon, Georgia, right?
Yeah, definitely change of pace. And Macon had his strong points and had his weaknesses too. Being a guy right out of college, I was happy to move to New York City, even though I was actually born in Macon. My dad was a pastor of a church down there. And
that explains Scott's tie to the Christian bands.
Well, yeah, we're preacher's kids. What happened was when I went up to FBI, long story short, I ended up leaving after 6 years, start my own agency. And then Scott was graduating from Davidson. I asked if he wanted to come up and join me, and he did. And then after several years of running my own operation, I got an offer. ICM came and wanted to buy my company, moved me to run the West Coast office. And they just wanted me. And I said, well, my brother has to come too. And that was the last deal point. And so I got him a 2-year deal. I said, all right, I'm giving you 2 years and then you're on after that.
You're in the New York office or the LA office?
I was in the LA office. Scott stayed in New York.
So what brought you to Nashville? When did that move happen? Because you've been here for a while now.
Well, it was back when the whole country thing started exploding and this whole group of new country faces came in the marketplace and really took it mainstream. It wasn't this backwoods musical form anymore. It started expanding. So it was one of those things that everybody wanted to get in. And I had a sizable Christian roster, and those artists were based out of Nashville. So ICM thought like, well, we need to get in the country music business. So we were trying to negotiate a deal for me to move from LA to Nashville. And I had 2 kids who were 5 and 3 at the time. And I looked, if I can get to Nashville and LA paycheck and no state income tax, where do I sign up? So it took a while and just couldn't cross the T's, dot the I's. It was a lot easier selling my company and moving to LA than it was to try to relocate to Nashville. And I think the big man upstairs kind of directed me towards CAA. And at the same time, Jim Halsey Company we were talking about buying them. That deal fell through. They ended up selling to William Morris. Ron Baird was an agent at the Halsey Company, and then he went to William Morris. He really didn't want to go there, and also the manager of Clint Black really didn't want him to go there, but he went.
Amazing how managers can have a little influence.
A little influence, but they tried to talk CAA into opening an office in Nashville, and they said, well, we really don't want to have an office outside of L.A., and then they actually flew Ron out to see if Ron would like being in L.A., and his wife very quickly said no. So at the same time, I'm still trying to finish my deal with ICM to move here. Subsequently, they hired Ron as a consultant. He left William Morris and started working out of his house as a consultant. And I was just frustrated with getting my deal done. And I saw Tom Ross at a Music Cares dinner or something. I said, hey, you're going to get serious about Nashville. Subsequently, over the course of 5 years, the CAA had approached me several times about working there, and I said no. Once I did a contract, so I was under contract. It was kind of hard to do. But then I asked if he was getting serious, and he said, well, I thought you were doing something with ICM. I said, well, that's my plan, but I haven't signed on the dotted line. And he said, well, if you're free, we'd love to talk. And I said, well, would you put your initials on an office in that? And he said, yeah, if you were available. You and Ron together would be a powerful house and a powerful entity to deal with. And I basically said resign and jumped ship and went over. The funny thing was Ron was calling me, he wanted to come to ICM while he was still at William Morris. And then now I'm calling him going, hey, can I come over with you at CAA? So it was kind of, we each had to do reverse interviews.
So there was a moment when CAA entered the market in Nashville with an actual office that ICM could have possibly done that at the same time with you.
Yeah, well, then there would have been 2. There had been an ICM office and a CAA office. And little did I know that ICM actually had been in Nashville and had the Judds and had Reba, had several big artists. And when ICM bought ATI, the head of ATI was now in charge of the personal appearance department, and they closed the Nashville office down of ICM, which kind of put him more of in a negative position. I had no clue when I was attempting to go there for ICM. So it was actually a very fortuitous move of mine to not start at a negative level.
Right, because there's still that lasting linger of them cutting bait from last time.
Yeah. And it's interesting, too, just because of my history in the rock world, too, and they were with the FBI, and now I'm fully entrenched in the country thing, and obviously the Christian as well. Coda and all these other different companies kind of operate in a different realm of, and I see new bands. Even my wife will say, "Hey, I want to go to Bonnaroo to go see so and so," and I go, "Who?" There's just so many.
There's too many. You can't possibly know them
many
all.
New bands that are just happening, and it's got us enough to get my format down.
It's amazing when you meet somebody in the bar at one of these conferences, and they're like, "Yeah, I work with this band." I'm like, "Oh, great. What kind of business are you doing?" I'm like, "We sold out 2 nights at Hammerstein." It's like, really? I have not heard of them. I feel like an idiot.
There's so much stuff out
and you're
there.
all in this world, so.
Yeah.
Apparently we suck at our job. CAA has had amazing growth since the two of you started. You guys have moved up, filled a building completely, and then moved to a bigger one. You guys are a powerhouse here, possibly the biggest agent in the market.
Yeah, this town is pretty much a 2-horse town between us and WME. We both have spies at the Greyhound bus stop looking for anyone who gets off the bus with a guitar. And you think I'm joking. It's now just the way the business has evolved over the last half a dozen years and the changes in the label structures. We're huge in our source for labels. We're usually at the plate before they are most times.
The number of CAA people you'll just simply see at a random show that might be playing at the Basement or any of these small clubs, Springwater on a Monday night. Crazy. You guys are out there pounding the pavement, finding what's breaking out here, and as the world shifts to focus on live music and that be the bulk of the business and a key source of development for artists, agents are going to be right there at the front of it.
The agency game has changed quite a bit over the years, and now it's not uncommon for teams to be involved instead of one single RA in a development where you'll have guys in multiple offices, many people being involved to help develop an act. Is that the future of the business?
Yeah, I think service is the key. I mean, the one thing that we do is our equity is our time and talent and knowledge that we plow into an artist and in their career. And there's so many different aspects that used to be a function of the label and has graduated down or sideways or however you may say it to either management or agency business. Big, huge companies all have marketing people. We have marketing people where we're...
And you guys were kind of the first at that. Like Ellie McGregor was really the first in-house marketing person. You guys started that trend and now everybody has them.
It's what people expect now. It's service, 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 paying attention. Now there's so much talent coming out of this town. It's really easy for an act to feel insecure if they don't think they're getting the treatment that they need to get, attention they get from the agent or agencies.
It's the truth. To be competitive, you're absorbing more of the functions of labels. You're absorbing a little bit of management functions.
I wish they sit there cry poorhouse, but they're still throwing some pretty darn nice parties. So I think
those number ones at Topgolf,
Yeah. When streaming coming in, I think revenue's kind of tilted the other way. So I don't hear as much moaning and groaning as I used to.
Country music is a little different than the rest of the industry, too. It seems like the record business on the countryside has been a little bit more solid across the board, that those labels are definitely seeing sales still, and they're still topping the charts. So they're not struggling nearly as much as the other sides of the business.
I would think the sales side, the pendulum has switched to streaming.
Well, yeah, but they're still selling product, though. It's still moving.
Yes.
I mean, because country radio still exists in a bigger format than like any of the other formats.
That's what I was going to say. The terrestrial radio format is still huge, still probably the number one driver of the business right now.
The only thing that can upset a national on sale is if a PD at a solid station at a country station in a market says no. As a promoter, I can't stop a national on sale playing a particular market and break it out. Usually the venue can't, but if the PD doesn't want that show to go up on a certain day, we will all stop and pay attention, and they'll get the manager to like announce the date and put it up a little bit later. They'll announce the tour. Like those guys are still that powerful. There's not too many rock stations in the country that can do that anymore.
Right. No, most of them don't care. Well, I shouldn't say that. I couldn't even really speak to that. But yeah, you're right.
We agree with that actual statement. I do wheel with them, and I think that's pretty true. But yeah, the country guys tend to care a lot. They want to make sure that they're timing those out, that number right.
Well, it's a huge connection to the fan base. It's a real fan-friendly marketplace and a fan-friendly format. They really cater to their audience, and the audience are the drivers.
What has been your draw and affinity to country music? Has it been the music itself? Has it been that sense of community you talked about? What's kept you engaged through all these years in this genre of music?
I would say, well, the music is so diverse. I mean, you have everything from Aaron Lewis to Kelsey Ballerini. You got a pretty good range or to Dwight Yoakam. Within the format, there's a huge range of diversity within it. And for the most part, I would just say it's the people. It's the type of people that drawn to be artists in the format. Those are people I want to take home for dinner. That I do call my best friends, or guys that I do want to hang out with. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, they're just normal guys that want to live in Nashville, want to raise a family. I mean, the greatest thing I loved when I moved from LA to here was the 6 o'clock showcase. It's like awesome. If you're a new band, back in the 80s in New York, I mean, bands would go on stage at like 1 a.m. It was crazy.
You got happy hour here every day.
Exactly. And now here it's 6 o'clock. And if you want anybody in the business to come see you, you go on at 9 o'clock. 9?
Not
I'm
gonna
home.
happen.
It's like,
we got kids.
Kids and dogs,
Yeah. Heck, I'm in bed by 10. So the 6 o'clock showcase really showed you that, hey, it's a family-friendly, industry-friendly town. And just the acceptance of the music. And it'd be about the song, too, that when people talk about song more than style, it's about what you're saying in your lyric and how you're getting to the heart of the matter. And I think that's what drives this community and drives even rock people who move in here knows it's about music. What makes a country song? Is it because it's got a fiddle or a steel pedal? Well, a lot of people don't do that anymore. So you'd hear stuff that you kind of go, wow, that's really country? Well, heck, if they're playing on country radio, I guess it's country. There'd be arguments to what is and what isn't. Doesn't matter. It's what is, and that's what's on the charts. So I'll ride with that. I mean, you could have a good argument to say most Americana bands probably are more country than most country acts.
Yeah. When it comes to the country world, there's certainly been a change on the bigger level that tour promoters are kind of the thing. Brian O'Connell and Louis Messina certainly are dominating the game with some of those bigger acts. When an act goes to a tour promoter as an agent, do you lose any of the control?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about. I would say it's a plethora of deals and structures and relationships that vary from artist to artist. Every act's a snowflake. They're all different. And every relationship with one of those mainstream promoters. I mean, I'm sure one of the two biggies, Louis or Brian, are different as well. So, yeah, you do a little bit. A lot of times it's even harder, because it's easy for an act or a manager to, so-and-so's got it. But if you have everything, do you look at each individual date as strong? Are you as good at all the markets? Collectively, you've got a deal. So the sum of the deal may end up being in your advantage. But individually, are you playing Chicago in the best location with the best promotion? Do you have the best relationships in that city? In Detroit, are you in the best situation, the best promoter? Who's reflecting and looking at that? So if they're not crossed, you probably got a better shot. But if most of them are, the collective sum is more or less what I'm scared sometimes people are leaning on. And I think sometimes our job as agents is to look at every date as an individual date and make sure those dates are maximized to their fullest potential.
Very few of those tour deals become not cross-collateralized at that point. It seems like that's a bigger part of that game now.
Yeah, believe it or not, I hadn't had one that has been crossed yet.
Really?
Not to say that
I
it
haven't
won't.
had one that has been crossed.
It's a better agent than most of those guys doing tour deals.
Seriously?
Well, it depends on. Sometimes if you get a bigger number because it is crossed, that can work for your advantage as well.
Walk us through your day-to-day. You've got a big team and a big shop and a big operation over there, but there are artists that you're still looking after on a daily basis. You're not just a leader of an office. You're a responsible agent for some.
My guilty part is I love booking shows.
Yeah.
I love being a booking agency. I always thought it was funny. It's like the way you're successful is when you graduate and not have to book a territory and not have a booking territory. So you're trying to tell me I'm successful when I graduate to not have to book. But good booking agent by not booking. So I have to get my hands in it somehow. So I find joy, too, in starting stuff up. Sometimes maybe not necessarily the biggest thing, but it may be something starting something or coming in that gets something over the finish line. Like I just kind of helped I'm on the CMA board, a CMA songwriter series, expanded over in Europe. I think one of our callings and what we want to do is expand the international market for country music. Yeah. They're doing these songwriter shows in country music.
Parks in London, right?
Yeah, where you have 3 or 4 songwriters or artists that go and do a show. It's kind of like Bluebird.
Right.
But I said, what a great way to make an intro for a new artist in a different territory where it's the artist and the guitar. not 6-piece band and 3 crew and gear and equipment and all this other stuff. So if you can aggregate 3 or 4 artists who are songwriters and you put them on a showcase, it's almost like a promo tour to plant their seeds in a marketplace and get their first blush without getting stuck with huge overhead. And CMA did it this year and underwrote the shortfall on it. And it was a huge success, and they're going to do it again and hopefully have a couple of tours a year in Europe, probably put one in the Pac Rim next year as well to hit Australia and Hawaii and New Zealand. And yeah, it's a good way to get new artists in there without having to go in debt.
You guys have seen some real growth with country outside North America in the last handful of years.
Thank God for the show Nashville. Seriously.
Is that what motivated country to happen? Because that seems like
it had already started, but it's kind of what blew the format up.
AEG and Simon Moran seem to have really moved the ball in Europe with
they've
bringing those festivals.
Yeah, they've done a great job.
I think it was the last time I saw you. Actually, it was backstage at O2.
I think it was putting the new face on it. I think country almost everywhere in the world was 2-step, cowboy hats, Wrangler jeans. That's what it was. And now I think the other parts of the world are now seeing as we see it. And I think a large part has 2 things. That show has helped tremendously and streaming has helped tremendously. So I went to the CMC in Australia in 2015 and I was blown away by the crowd singing every song of the artist. It's not just the single. They know every song in the artist's catalog because they're ferociously hungry for it because they don't get a lot of it.
Does Show Nashville literally open the door internationally to a lot of that genre to open up to the world?
Well, it took it to another level and put a new face on it. Amplified it. And I think it's done a fairly good job of it's still television. There's still a lot of it sensationalized. But it done a fairly good job of showing putting a good face on country music as it is in this era.
That's fascinating. I haven't heard that. That's great.
I think even just commenting on the growth of Nashville as a city as well, too. That's been the best commercial for this town, airing 52 minutes at a time.
The cast of there went over, sold out 2 Royal Albert Halls. That says there's a following. So if you want to come see Chip Eston tonight. Deacon Claiborne, live and on stage, 6:30.
And Frankie Ballard as well.
Frankie, absolutely. Yeah. Come on.
It's my guilty pleasure. I love watching the show. Although I have a little problem when they're like, you see the phone call, you want to open at Mercy Lounge tonight? I've never seen that side of the business where it's like trying to decide if we're going to open a show at Mercy Lounge tonight. I love that side of the business because that
doesn't exist. We know that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Unless somebody's sick and you get that frantic call.
Right. But it's
for the most part.
I don't know. Sold that show. Yeah, okay. I guess.
When are we starting our tour? Oh, this Saturday night. Yeah, this Friday night. We're going to start our tour. I'm confirming it today, and it's going to start on Friday. Yeah.
Raina James is always on the side of the stage at the Ryman. I've promoted, like 40 shows there over the last couple of years. I have not seen her once. So what's the future for CAA hold?
We've had a great run here in Nashville, and I think the future for CAA has been a rocket ship up, and hopefully the flight of that rocket will continue into the stratosphere. We're excited about being in Nashville and excited about everything we've done so far and excited about our future.
Are there any acts or agents that you want our listeners on Promoter 101 to hear about?
Well, it's so funny with I think we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years the increase. There was a whole thing, we need more tomatoes, about the lack of women for so long. It was Miranda and Carrie were the only 2 that had, we've got a history of Faith and Reba and a lot of other artists, but we're the new female artist. And subsequently, we've seen Kelsey Ballerini break through, and we've seen Maren Morris break through, and there are a lot more right on their heels. And I think also with that, we've got with Meredith Jones or Kylan Sharp, 2 agents that are doing great. Jeff Crones just got on the ACM board. He plays both worlds, in the rock side and the country side. And actually, the Christian side, a lot of the rock bands that he have a faith component of their DNA. So he's a man of many talents and across many fields. So I don't want to leave anyone out, just because I think our staff is great and very fine-tuned and want to continue to grow them and we grow our company.
There's certainly a trend in music now where the VIP experience has changed with the fans, where it used to be you went to the show and you left, and if you maybe won a radio contest, you might get to meet the band. But now you can have that experience. If for almost every single level from the clubs on up, you can buy a VIP experience where you have some kind of interaction with the fan. Do you feel that that's a very healthy thing, that the hardcores can get to the act that way?
You know what? I've got a mixed emotion about it because it's usually the rich hardcore.
Right.
Because
hardcore. That is an experience, yeah.
Yeah, it's if you got the money to pay for it, or if mommy, daddy, or whatever it is.
Right, because basically we're selling what the radio promotion used to be now.
Correct.
The sound check party used to be something you'd win, or the meet and greet used to be something you'd win, and now it's something that you can buy with your front row ticket with the lift.
Well, it used to be illegal to scalp a ticket. Now it's commonplace. It's
quite literally legal in some states.
Well, it is in every. I mean, where can you not put a ticket back on StubHub or whatever format and at whatever price you can get? So the free market has hit it. And hey, the free market's a free market. God bless America and democracy and free enterprise. So I think that there's a good part of that. But I think the discouraging factor of the balance between what our job is, capitalize as much revenue as we can for our artists, which I'm all in favor of that, and making sure that the true fan, the fan experience is a good one too. If they've kind of succumbed to this is the way it is, and I'm only going to spend X amount of dollars, I am going to be on the back row, and they're content with that, fine. Somehow you lose a little of that. We're in it for the common man,
Right. Kind of that Garth Brooks thing where everything's priced the same across the house, and we'll keep rolling shows until we run out of tickets.
There's a little admiration to have for that. There's both sides of that coin I'd question, but it's a fine art too. It's how you take care of your consumer the best way you can at whatever level they're coming. Hey, as I feel about concert tickets like I do healthcare. I think everybody should get healthcare, and if you can afford to do it first class, then you pay extra and you get the front of the line. So it's the American way.
Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us on Promoter 101.
You got it. Glad to be here.
Huie is a born leader. He's an inspiration just to listen to. What a great guy. And thanks to him for giving us the time and coming on the podcast this week.
Hi, I'm Holly Gleason, editor of Women Walk the Line, here at Promoter 101, where they know how to get it done.
Steiny, I want to jump into some of your tweets from the past week. You got to humor us and explain what was going on in your head when you wrote each of these Promoter 101 tweets. Start with this one. When an agent drops a tour routing call on you at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Wednesday of Thanksgiving.
So it turns out in Canada, they don't respect our Thanksgiving holiday.
I appreciate you taking that phone call.
Yeah, I guess you just caught me on that one, Luke. It was a Home for Canadian rap that we were working on.
The Canadian Thanksgiving is in October, Dan, so I'm sure that we're bothering him on a Monday in October or something, too.
You know what? Yeah, okay.
How about this? When the tour accountant insists on finding where 1 cent error is on the settlement sheet.
Usually it's in the tax. It's a rounding error. But there's a difference between Excel on the Apple and Excel on the PC. And it's usually off by $1 because it rounds in one direction or the other. If you're looking for a penny, it ain't worth our time. Take the goddamn penny.
When an act challenges and clears a date, then tells you to release it and go get the other venue in the market instead.
Oh, my God. The bridges you're burning in my name. Jesus Christ.
When the show sells out, it's because the artist is amazing. When it bombs, it's because you're a shitty promoter.
And that's the world we live in. God bless America.
That does it for Promoter 101 Tweets of the Week. You can follow Dan on Twitter. He's @TheJew. And if you have any of your own Promoter 101 thoughts, feel free to tweet them at us or email them over. Anything that makes us smile will get used on the air.
Hey everyone, this is Cindy Leinott,
Bruce Solar,
Ali Spagnola,
Ari Herstand,
J-Bo Lewis,
Michael Yerke,
John Meglin,
David Brett,
Larry Butler,
Andy Gould,
John Finberg,
Kira Finkenberg,
Jonathan Shank.
You are listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Dan, this week for our war story, we've got a second story from CID Entertainment's Dan Berkowitz.
Dan Berkowitz, give us a war story, man. Let's talk about Lollapalooza and the enhanced experience.
To call it a war story would be a disservice to how much I absolutely love Charlie Walker and the rest of the C's and the people at C3. But people in our business, some people might lose shows to other folks that are new in the promoter game, and there's history and people that set up programs or set up tours or do shows that might lose them in the future. Lollapalooza and ACL are a perfect example of that. Charlie Walker has been a friend and a mentor to me for many years, and we were blessed to be able to do Lollapalooza and ACL for as long as that we did. With that said, I almost feel like, I don't know if push notifications were a thing in this day, so I might just be totally making this up. But I almost feel like I got a push notification from Billboard that Live Nation was buying C3. And at the same time that I saw that Charlie Walker was calling me. I was like, this is interesting. So I picked up the phone and Charlie goes, Dan, the next 3 minutes are going to be the toughest part of our relationship ever. But I promise you're going to be okay, and so am I. Mostly me, but you're also going to be okay. He's like, we
Can you hear him saying it?
We appreciate the work that you've done, but we're going to take these platinum program and we're going to take the travel packages in-house. Now, what's interesting, and I'll just tell the whole story and then get into it. But, and I'll never forget this phrase because he taught me this phrase because I didn't know it. And he goes, and Dan, this train's already left the station, so it doesn't make sense to chase it. So, we're going to move forward. And
fucked is fucked.
And like the gentleman that he is, he let us keep the next year of Lollapalooza because it was already it was kind of in the cycle. Like I would say that this was like February and Lolla was going to be in July and then ACL was in October. So we did the next Lolla and we had to deal with the reality of the fact that we were losing the next ACL and all Lollas and ACL in perpetuity. And he was right. That was the toughest 3 minutes of our relationship. And he said, Dan, this is the music business and this is a business decision that has nothing to do with the job that you guys did or the person that you are. The program that we created the Platinum program, which evolved out of the Cabana program from at Lollapalooza. 5-6 years into it, we did very little. The travel packages as well, we didn't have shuttles. We worked with very few hotels because the hotels in Chicago are all so big. So we worked with 2 or 3 hotels. And the travel packages were tickets, hotels, and a poster. So C3 built the travel packages on their own ticketing site. C3 gave us the tickets, C3 gave us the posters, and we simply contracted with the hotels and basically did nothing else. So for them to take the program in-house, unlike if Coachella did, which, would be absolutely miserable, and I would probably cease to exist as a human being if anybody over there is listening right now. But what we do over there is very, very, very labor intensive. We have hundreds of people that work with us out there. We have dozens of people that come out to meetings in LA quarterly, sometimes even monthly to plan. We move 40 to 50,000 people a day on our shuttles there. So we're really involved operationally at Coachella. At Lollapalooza, we really weren't.
You were wraparound at one and the other one you guys are built in, hardwired.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost joke at Lollapalooza that we'd check people into the travel packages and we'd be like, okay, well, press 0 if you have any problems. Call the front desk because we're kind of done here because there was just nothing left for us to do.
Dan is so cool. We have a feature interview coming up with him in just a few weeks. Excited about that. He's a hell of a storyteller, as you can see.
Hello, this is Dan Berkowitz from CID Entertainment and CID Presents, and I am here on Promoter 101.
Finally today, we close with a sit-down interview with David Geller, best known for his work at IMP, C3, and managing the Thievery Corporation.
David Geller, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Long time in the making. We were actually going to do this in Austin, and you got stuck on a tarmac.
Yeah, I usually miss about 3 or 4 appointments with people before I actually show up. That's par for the course.
So I got it on 2, so I'm ahead of the game.
Correct.
Thievery Corporation, you built up to an amazing level. They killed it last year.
Well, thank you. A lot of people don't know, but the band and I parted ways in February, but I am really proud of the body of work. I mean, I never anticipated being a manager, let alone traveling around the world with this band, but it was incredible. It's a big part of my life.
What's new on the plate now that you've got that taken off?
At one point, I realized, wow, I haven't really embraced the management company building thing. And instead of scaling up, I sort of walked backwards into just managing Thievery. And I knew that wasn't going to last forever. And approaching 49 years old, I'm like, what's going to be next? There's people like you who I really admire who have ramped up their operation, and so many smart young people and people much more intertwined with technology that I just didn't have a grasp on. That I knew that what I was going to do next was probably going to be outside the music space. And so I'm in Denver. I'm lucky enough to be around some pretty heavy hitters in the cannabis space. Been helping place some money. There's some institutional money approaching the space. I've been lucky enough to get myself in between a couple deals. I'm still doing the Thievery deal, which is going to be called Lebanese Blonde after their big song.
You're talking about a particular strain that you've branded in the cannabis world with Thievery Corporation.
We decided, we took a wait and see approach because we saw a lot of artists, bands, intellectual property coming into the space and they would announce, and it wasn't really that exciting a short month later.
Well, because the products weren't that good or they didn't have a consistent basis, right?
I think that they also didn't realize that if there was a perpetual parade of bands and artists entering the space, I'm naming this strain after this or that, it's not really that exciting. It's only as exciting until the next person does it. At the same time, we were watching the per pound price drop from $3,000 down to $1,500. So at one point I had an epiphany, and luckily Rob and Eric went along with me. It was we wanted to use Lebanese Blonde. The song is so well known worldwide. It's about hashish. And we decided that we were just going to bypass the flower business and get into the oil business. That our vision was that Lebanese Blonde would be an oil, a shatter, more of a hash oil-based product. So we've made a deal with this company out of California called Pax, who's actually a pen manufacturer.
For vape.
Yeah. We're dealing locally with some extractors here in Colorado and eventually in California. And we've decided decided to curate the oil, not in terms of what the flavor or taste is, but that Lebanese blonde is an experience, that hopefully that what makes it Lebanese blonde is the feeling, not the taste or the smell. It's the high that you get from it. And we'll probably do a CBD-based product with the same name.
CBD, can you define that for our listeners?
CBD is a cannabinoid. It's a non-THC cannabinoid, if I'm even explaining that the right way, but it's a derivative from the hemp plant that is not meant to get you high or really have a...
Or like a non-alcoholic beer almost for the weed world.
It's CBD is an anti-inflammatory, arguably a pain reliever, and there's going to be some continued publication about that it's perhaps an anti-carcinogen. It's a cancer fighter.
But it's more about the medical use than it is about getting high.
CBD is a medical application. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a pain reliever. It's helping people that have seizures. It has zero psychological effect. It's not something you do for recreational get high use. It's something that you use to relieve some sort of pain or inflammation. And the sky's the limit. The strange thing is that the government, the United States government, actually has the patent on using CBD in this regard. So they've had it for about 20 years. So they knew this was a potent thing. So I've come out here. I'm dabbling in and around the cannabis thing, which is a growing industry. I live with one of the principals from Native Roots, Rhett Jordan, who's been really kind enough to give me a front row seat as he builds his consultation business, and been made aware of a bunch of people scaling up and needing money and going back to the East Coast and West Coast. And like I said, my family has some real estate out here, and I've been tagging around my Uncle Buzz, hoping to make some rain in that space with him.
We were just talking about that before you started the podcast. It's a weird connection between our families. My dad used to rent restaurant properties from your uncle.
The longer that I stay in Denver, the more I realize how many people know my Uncle Buzz. One of the funniest days I've had since I moved to Denver is I wanted Don Strasberg to sit down and meet my uncle. And we decided to go to the Palm. And between Don, Chuck Morris, and my uncle, it took like 40 minutes just for them to get to the table, having to say hello to everybody in the restaurant. I felt really underclassed. And
well, dude, everybody knows Paradise Cleaners. I mean, he literally is the George Jefferson of Denver, man. He came up.
He is. I don't get my dry cleaning for free, but I do get it at cost.
You moved back to Denver, and that's a serious life change.
Serious life change. I was living in Mexico before I got here.
What part?
I was living in Playa del Carmen in Tulum, on the east coast, to the Caribbean coast, just south of Cancun.
I was hoping you were going to say you were in Tijuana running the donkey show, but I knew that wasn't going to be the case.
I wouldn't say even if I had done that. I've done some things in Tijuana I'm not proud of.
What were you doing in Mexico? I mean, obviously you were doing the management thing at that point.
Rob Garza, half of the duo that is Thievery Corporation, has had business down there for the better part of 10 years. And as I was leaving C3 but keeping Thievery Corporation as a management client, they started to ramp up some of the restaurant and hotel portions of his business down there. And his business partners had become really, really close friends of mine. So they gave me the opportunity to sort of go down there and stick around them. And the idea was that as they built these businesses out, that I would get more and more involved.
You were going to run the empire that was Thievery Corporation.
He's got his managing partner, Alejandro Gomez and Alberto. They're both shaman. It was more...
Really?
They have a mezcal called Papa Diablo. They just got the American FDA license. I'll probably continue to stick around that. And the mezcal market's growing here. But Rob and these guys have about 2.2 kilometers of beachfront property in Tulum, and will eventually have a really nice hotel project there. But Mexico is a really interesting place, especially right now. They've had some elections and they've had things with cartels, for lack of better terms. And I probably could have stayed down in Mexico. I'd started a ticketing company down there that ended up being more of a excursion-based business as opposed to concerts and entertainment. But it's a really complex place, Mexico. And at one point, I just didn't know if that was really the best place and the best use of my time.
It's funny because we promote in Canada and have for a very long time, but every time we've been pitched something to cross the border into Mexico, it becomes such a scary process of what's actually going to be involved, because there are so many extra elements that you can't factor in until they knock on your door.
And that was just a bunch of Mexico shop talk for a while, speaking for myself personally. And then, I'm fairly good friends with the guys that run the BPM festival, and I'll never forget being out with the brain trust of BPM that night, a couple guys from Red Bull, only for hours later for people to be gunned down in the street, basically right across the street from one of the restaurants that Rob owned. And that was a really serious eye-opener. I was like, people getting killed at a festival kind of, I think, hit very close home to me. I'm sure it did for Rob.
It's one thing when you see it in the movies. It's another thing when it's actually right there.
Yeah, it's a great market. I'm super proud of Dan Berkowitz and all everything that CID is doing down there. They're doing great. They have an incredible operation going on at the Barceló, and it appears to be trouble-free. And there's good and easy business to be done in Mexico, and it's a great destination place. But if you're going to live there and be there all year round, it's a slightly different experience, I think, than just kind of coming in, doing your thing, and leaving.
You know everybody, and you've come up through the business. Let's talk about where you started in your path to where it brought you to the C3 Days and catch everybody up.
Basically, a lot of my friends are older than I am. They all went to Tulane. When I was in high school, I visited them in Tulane and went to Tipitina's and saw the Radiators and the Neville Brothers and the Meters, and it just completely changed my musical life. Like I'd never...
Is Druskin part of that crew?
Druskin was my best friend's roommate. Druskin was right there with me. Druskin is actually responsible for my music business career. I'll get there in a minute. So I knew that I wanted to get down there. I couldn't afford to go to Tulane, so I ended up at Loyola, pre-law. At some point, I got involved with the concert bureau down at Loyola, and they would only do one show a year. And when I got involved, I said, listen, why wouldn't we open up to sell tickets to people from Tulane or the public? Like the gym holds 4,000. There's only 2,000 people that show up, and they were like, oh, yeah, that's a very good idea. So I sort of, got into the business by way of the concert board, and shortly thereafter got a barback job at Tipitina's. But I was so skinny, I couldn't carry the kegs up the stairs. Jim and Meecha Green, who owned the club at that point, were like, listen, you obviously love music. You're the shittiest barback we've ever had. How about you work with Sonny Schneider? So I started working with Sonny. I think that lasted for about 6 months before I got caught putting some girls on a radio station guest list on his desk. He had my handwriting, and he basically fired me.
Which is a pretty good lesson to learn early.
At the same time, Druskin and his snobby friends started something called the Crew of Snafu, Sex, Narcotics, and Fish Euphoria. I was good friends with the Radiators. They were good friends with the Radiators, and they were like, oh, dude, you're not in the crew because this is a Tulane thing, and you're at Loyola. So I ended up forming my own crew based around the Meters, and Steve Egerton, the manager of the Meters, and the late Tim Clary, manager of the Raiders, basically held my hand into the business. In short order, they both realized that I was a good promoter, but had no idea how to actually produce a show, especially concert production. And Steve Egerton hired me to be the assistant stage manager on the Ray-Ban stage at Jazz Fest. And that was a really...
Learning by fire, huh?
I mean, I learned a lot about production, but also I met almost every agent in the business would come through that stage, and managers, and it was an incredible Rolodex building thing. And by that point, I had started to do a lot of business with the Radiators. I basically left college. I didn't finish college. I asked my parents for my last year's tuition to start a business, which was largely built around doing Radiator shows and Blues Traveler shows wherever they needed a show, flying around the country, doing all that. And they were represented by William Morris, the Radiators, and Jonathan Levine. And Chip Hooper at the time was representing Blues Traveler. And I was doing some shows in the Hamptons in New York, and that was sort of my big thing, is like I had this venue in the Hamptons. It held about 3,000 people, 22 years old. But Mitch Slater and Ron Delsner got wind of this. I'm like, who the hell is this guy, Dave Geller? And between the local mafia and Ron and Mitch, Jonathan Levine and Chip, like, you're going to need to get out of New York. I mean, if you want to work for yourself, unless you want to go to work for these guys. So I'd done my first semester of school in Baltimore, and Dick Klotzman, the promoter there, had been arrested, and there really wasn't anybody there doing shows. And I went back to Baltimore and started doing my thing in Baltimore, and Chip and Jonathan were like, you got to get connected to Seth Hurwitz, who would not return my phone call.
That sounds right.
I would fax him every day. I would have a handwritten thing. I would fax him every day. And finally, on day like 100, I get a call from him saying, what do you want from me? So he and his partner, Rich Heineke, and I got together, and I became the IMP Baltimore guy. And we opened Fletcher's and Bohager's and had the Hammer Jacks contract. And somewhere along the line, there was a city councilman that I knew in Columbia, Maryland, who had sort of let on that they were going to bid out Merriweather. So Seth and I got heavily involved with that. And luckily for Seth, he got the contract, and that was a really, really big break for me. And I moved my office to Merriweather, and we had the Baltimore stuff. And at one point, Andrew Jeskin re-entered our lives and brought in Richard Branson and the Virgin Festival. And we decided to do it at Pimlico, which was one of my accounts, Pimlico Racecourse.
And this was a free festival, right?
It started off at Pimlico as a $150 3-day ticket. It was a major, 8-stage.
Okay, so it developed into the
free thing.
We never made money there. We just, Seth booked a hell of a lineup. I mean, there was no filler. But I think we did a good job on the experience. I don't know that Pimlico lent itself to the best experience possible. We were just very focused on the booking. And at one point, I think that Sprint brought Virgin Mobile, and they had it figured into their budget that they would like to basically do this as a free show, and it moved to Merriweather. That was about the same time that I started managing Thievery, and unfortunately at that juncture needed to make a choice. Seth had previously been the manager. We had done it ourselves, done it together, and at some point I had to make a decision about whether I was going to be this band's manager or continue working with Seth, because doing both based on the personal circumstances just wasn't possible. And
also the time commitment working for INP, running that venue.
Well, that was, I don't have many regrets. I mean, I'm not going to say that I regret not sticking with Seth, but it was a great gig. I made a ton of money. We had a lot of fun doing it. I still love everyone that works at INP. I think that they're one of the best, if not the best, concert company in the country. They just do a great job from the 930 Club right on up. I'm excited about Anthem. By the time you go 12 years with the band and you traveled around the world, and it's awesome, and but that ends and you leave the band and you look at what Seth's still doing, there'll always be part of me that will wonder what would have happened if I stayed. But I'm glad that he and I have become very close friends again, and it's all good. In the beginning, when I first started working with Thievery, Charles Attell and Charlie Jones from C3 were big Thievery supporters. Played ACL a bunch of times, Stubbs. Charles knew that I was going to be leaving IMP and made me an offer to come down with Thievery to C3. And I was like, listen, I really don't know what I'm doing. I manage this one band. He's like, well, we don't know what we're doing with management either. So why don't you, come on down.
We'll all fall together.
Seth and I had also had a brief communication with Mike Rapino and Charlie Walker when Charlie was still at Live Nation about a potential deal for us to take over the whole market. That ultimately didn't work out. Seth really never wanted to do it. I, as a business development person, got really excited about what life might be like if we took over the whole market and Live Nation let us run it. But I should have known that Seth was never, ever going to do that. And he told me, he's like, I don't know why you thought I would ever do this. I would never, ever do this.
Knowing Seth as I do, I don't know why you would have thought that either.
But through that communication, Walker and I developed a friendship, and he came down to C3 just a little bit, maybe about a year or two before I did. So
it's an interesting parallel there too, between Glancy leaving Live Nation to go work at Bowery or become a partner, and Walker leaving to go to C3 almost at the same time. It's a very interesting thing when the big guys from the inside both walked off that ship to go do their own thing.
It's funny because I remember Charlie Walker still at Live Nation telling Glancy when he left, this will end in tears, ended in tears of joy for Jim. But the C3 thing was amazing. It was great. I don't know if it was the best fit. Seth kind of treated me more like a partner. Seth is that way. Seth is not. It's not really important for Seth to be the boss. He's sort of like, it's a small team of people at IMP, and you do it together, and everyone knows he's the boss. The Charlies were creating a much bigger company, and they had very little patience for me stepping out of line, especially at the office. I got myself into all sorts of trouble there all the time. I was not an ideal employee. I was great at signing bands and, above average at managing them, perhaps, but I wasn't a good fit for a corporate structure. I wasn't a good fit for me to have actual bosses and human resource people, but it was incredible to watch them build up Lala, build up their company. I shared an office with Walker. That was an incredible experience also. And, when it was time for me to leave, it was time for me to leave. They probably would have fired me if I didn't leave. And then 3 or 4 year shift on my own. And here I am at Denver, sort of just with the last bits of the music business still in my professional life and looking forward to what's next.
And you said that you may not be an ideal employee for a corporate structure, but companies really need guys like you that bring people together. You are social dynamo when it comes to that. You know everybody and people are attracted to you, but that center of where's the life of the party, where's everybody, and usually it's around you.
I'd like to think so. I always thought that there was a method to my madness, and I always thought that there was a value to the social element. I'm quite sure that's true. And yes, I think especially in the music business, if we lose our personality, then that can't be good. I mean, it's art, it's creativity. We're not like doing rocket science or brain surgery. We're promoting concerts and making records. It was important to me to always have a really good time doing this, and I did. And when I stopped being able to have the good time that I wanted to is sort of parallel to realizing that this wasn't going to last forever. But I feel really lucky that even though I'm not managing Thievery right now, I'm not managing any bands. I have no equity stake in any live shows, but I'm still very welcome. People are still treating me like I'm in the business. And that was my biggest fear, is that, like, if I don't have a tangible connection to this whole thing, what will become of me? But I realize after 26 years that maybe I've paid enough dues to still be welcome most places I want to go.
Let's talk about the transition into the cannabis world from music. This is not a new story. You got guys like Benji Gold doing it across the board. You see, either we're all investing in it, and me and Jason we're involved with Zoots, but you're seeing it a lot. This is not a new story. What is the connection between the music world and cannabis that it's such an easy leap?
It is, but it isn't. And one thing that Eric, Rob, and I decided on the Thievery tip was that this needed to be bigger than just us coming out with a strain. Now, okay, it's Thievery, it's Lebanese Blonde. And one thing that we've waited a long time to do is to create an actual music integration element. The PAX company has an app. You can control the heat of the pen. You can shut the pen down so no one can smoke it. And our music will be on the app. We're talking about giving away some music with the sale of the pen or the cartridge, like Lebanese Blonde Live at Red Rocks.
Like free download or something?
Yeah, and we're also talking to the retailers about some programming so that they're playing our music in the stores and that there's some activation when the band has new music. And we're hopefully, when we roll this out, instead of it just being a story about, oh, Thievery Corporation has a cannabis product, that there's actually a music play. And so while you say that it's this natural leap, I really haven't seen very many people on the music business management side. I see bands like Snoop or the Marleys or Willie Nelson, and they're basically attaching their name to product, but there's no music play. And with all these stores and all these people, I think that there's something to be done. Shep Gordon sort of put that idea in my mind. So we're as focused on how is this thing going to showcase our music as much as just lending our name to a cannabis product. And I think that that's going to be the people in the space that really succeed are going to do something more three-dimensional than just, okay, it's such and such as weed. That's my opinion.
Seems like as companies come and go and people fail and the better products rise, we're going to see real players getting involved more and more as the quality control gets involved and people learn what they're doing in that field.
On the commerce side, our goal is to have Lebanese Blonde's oil be like Bubble Kush, like a household name in the oil space. Not the flower space, not that. If we could really use our promotional value and create a name in the oil space, that would be something. If the CBD element could help people, and then the whole effort could be a platform to sell more Thievery music or generate more awareness for the band, then we'll have set out what we wanted to do.
Let's talk about the kids coming up in the business. What kind of advice can you give them looking back at your career? What can you say are the things that you should do if you really want to have a chance to make it out of the mailroom?
That's an interesting question, because I'm 49 years old. Back when I was 21 or 22, if you had money and you had some level of connection and some practical venue that you could use, these people would take your money. If you had the balls and the connections, you could make it happen. It's not exactly as easy. The other thing is, instead of giving advice, I find myself getting a lot of good advice from some of these younger guys. I'm like super impressed with the Lee Andersons of the world, or my friend Evan Weinstein in Baltimore. There's so many people I could talk about, but there's just so many smart people. And on top of having the balls and the gut instinct and the love of music, they have this awareness of technology that I didn't have. So I find myself soliciting advice and learning a lot more than preaching. But what I guess maybe if I was going to give any advice, I never did this for the money. I loved music. I've always loved music. And when I was at Loyola producing my first Allman Brothers show, it was like, this is what I want to do. The gratification of there being nothing, and then you conceptualize it, you logisticize it, you market it, you do it, you can make some money, people are happy. I did it because I loved it. And I think that's still important in this business, is that there's a lot of ways to make money. This is a really hard one to do it. You got to do it because you love it. And there's always going to be naysayers. And if you want to be in this business, you've got to stick to your plan because you love it. And you've got to believe in your heart and mind and soul that you can do it.
So you said that you got fired when you were young for sneaking some names on a radio guest list. What would you say in lines with stuff like that were the mistakes that you would avoid if you had the opportunity again, looking back?
Oh, that's a good question. I've made so many worse mistakes than the guest list thing. The guest list thing with Sonny is like almost like a shining moment of some of the mistakes I've made. You can't cut corners in this business. It's a very competitive business. It can be unfair. It was like that back when I started. It's like that now. And one of the big mistakes I made is that I felt entitled cutting corners, maybe not always doing the right thing, because I thought it was such a unfair and volatile space. But at one point I had a psychological shift and said, no, these things aren't working. You know, when you cut corners, you don't do the right thing, it whipsaws back at you. And I found that when I just put in the hard work and did things, dare I say, more honestly with higher integrity, that's really when things opened up for me. But there's a lot of glamour to the business. There's people that want tickets. There's people that want backstage. And if you try to take advantage of those things in an underhanded and not straightforward way, that's a one-way ticket out of the business. And if you can more honestly try to use those assets in a more transparent way, then you can have dinner reservations and meet the mayor and all sorts of things. So it's a balancing act.
What a great place to end. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us, David.
Thank you, Dan.
Dan, it seems like David's always on the move. I can't wait to see what he's going to be up to next.
I have a feeling it's going to have something to do with marijuana, licensing, and producting.
Hey, this is Mike McGinley.
Troy Blakely.
Mitch Rose.
Peter Katzis.
Mike Hayes.
Tony from APA. Vince Bannon.
Deshaun Healy.
Steve Rennian.
Rick Canny.
Sam Kincaid.
Rob McDermott. Happy to be here on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Promoter 101.
Dan, we got some birthdays to celebrate this week. It's December 1st through December 7th, 2017.
Hey, it's Friday, and today, December 1st, Knitting Factory's Peter Manning, Straight No Chasers Tyler Trapp, manager Vince Owinski, and ICM Partners Michelle Scarborough.
On Saturday, wishing a happy birthday to John Rudd.
Sunday, Christina Chambers.
On Monday, it's the 4th. Happy birthday to Madison House's Jesse Eratow, Fran Egler, and Jake Goldman.
Tuesday, Mike Mowry, Sean Etson, and UTA's Justin Bridgewater.
On Wednesday, wishing a happy birthday to Hardly Strictly's Don Holliday, Live Nation's Creston Thornton, and Josh Lacey.
Thursday, Jack Orban, David Levine, and Paul Goldman.
Happy birthday to you all from the gang at Promoter 101.
Y'all, you all. Y'all, y'all, you all.
Y'all.
Y'all.
Y'all. Y'all.
All right.
It's in Nashville now. I say y'all.
Y'all. All right. Well, happy birthday from y'all, from y'all of us.
Yeah. And you're still in Seattle, very much.
You heard about the Hebrew cowboy that came down for the hot chicken, right?
This is JJ Kasiri from Circle Talent Agency, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
Hey, if you want to reach out to us, you can always send us an email to steiny@promoter101.net. And remember, we want your questions for Mr. Jared Smith from Ticketmaster, so send those to us, and we'll possibly insert them into the interview next week.
That's right. Our next show, of course, is going to be coming to you from Aspen Live Conference. And Dan, again, we'll be sitting down with the president of Ticketmaster North America, Jared Smith. Great podcast next week, Dan. Can't wait for it.
Until then, we're wishing you sold-out shows for the weeks to come. Cheers.
I'm Dave Geller, right here on Promoter 101 Podcast.